The first thing I noticed when I woke up wasn't the sterile hum of hospital monitors or the dull ache in my head. It was my mother, Evelyn, counting a thick stack of $100 bills at my bedside, her fingers flicking through them like a seasoned card dealer. "She's awake," my father, Richard, muttered, his eyes glued to his phone, scrolling through listings for luxury cars. My throat felt like sandpaper, my vision hazy, but I managed to rasp. "What are you doing?" Evelyn slipped the money into a sleek new purse I didn't recognize. "Oh, Lily, darling, how are you feeling?" she said, her voice syrupy. "The doctor said the tumor removal went smoothly. There might be some lasting effects, but you're alive, and that's what matters." Lasting effects. That was her euphemism for potential paralysis, speech issues, and months of grueling rehab. I tried to sit up, but my left side felt like it was anchored to the bed. "The money," I whispered. "Don't worry about that," she said, patting my hand as if I were a toddler. "We handled everything while you were out. Sold that little place of yours. You won't need it now, not in your condition." My place. The cozy two-bedroom cottage I'd bought at 25, scraping together the down payment from double shifts as a nurse. The home I'd poured my heart into renovating, where I'd planted a garden and carved out a life free from their control. "You sold my house?" Richard finally looked up. "Power of attorney, sweetheart. We knew you'd be too emotional to think clearly. The market was hot $400,000. Don't worry, we'll set you up in a nice facility." A facility. They'd already written me off, assuming brain surgery meant the end of my independence. But the real sting was the betrayal. I'd granted them power of attorney for medical decisions, not to dismantle my life. That was illegal. "That's not right," I managed. Evelyn's laugh was sharp, like glass. "Oh, Lily, always so theatrical. We're your parents. We know what's best." "The sale's done. Closed yesterday while you were in recovery." They lingered for 10 minutes, chatting about their plans for the money, a European getaway, a new car, investments. They spoke as if I wasn't there, or worse, as if I was already gone. When they left, promising to check in later, I was alone with my fury. The next days blurred, doctors, tests, physical therapy. My left side slowly came back to life, defying their bleak prognosis. My speech sharpened daily. But I kept my progress from them, letting them believe I was helpless. It would make my next move sweeter. On day 5, my friend Clara, a real estate attorney, visited after I texted her from the hospital. When I told her what happened, her eyes blazed with anger. "They forged documents," she said after reviewing the paperwork. "Healthcare power of attorney doesn't cover property sales. This is fraud, Lily. Major fraud." "I know," I said. "But first, check something else." I gave her my parents' address, the sprawling colonial where I'd grown up, where they'd hosted lavish parties and scoffed at my modest dreams. They thought they'd inherited it from my grandmother. They were wrong. Clara returned the next day, her expression a mix of shock and admiration. "Lily, how long have you known?" "Since I was 18, I admitted. Grandma told me before she passed. She never trusted them with money. The house is in a trust for me, effective when I turned 36 months ago. They've been living in my house without knowing it." I nodded, wincing at the pain. Grandma made them think they owned it outright, but they signed a lease agreement, a rent-free one I can terminate for breach of family trust. She was very clear about that clause. Clara's smile was razor-sharp. "And selling your house while you were unconscious? That's a breach if I ever saw one." The next 2 weeks were agonizing. Not from recovery, but from playing the part of a frail, confused patient while my body healed faster than expected. Evelyn and Richard visited twice, prattling about facilities and how the house money would ensure top-tier care. Meanwhile, Clara worked her magic. Fraud charges for the illegal sale, an asset freeze to stop their spending, and the coup de grace, an eviction notice for breaching the trust, giving them 30 days to vacate my house. I was discharged after 3 weeks, walking out on my own. They assumed I'd head to a care facility. Instead, I checked into a hotel, needing mobility for what came next. The eviction notice hit on a Tuesday. Evelyn called 17 times in an hour. I didn't answer. Richard's voicemails escalated from confusion to rage to panic. "Lily, this is a mistake. Call us. What's this eviction notice? This is our house. Your grandmother left it to us. You can't do this. We're your parents. On Wednesday, they stormed the hotel. From the lobby, I watched security escort them out. They looked haggard, like the house was the only thing holding them together. By Thursday, Clara reported their lawyer had reviewed the trust documents and told them they were out of luck. Grandma's paperwork was ironclad. Friday, Evelyn tried a new tactic, a tearful voicemail about family, forgiveness, and how they sold my house out of love for my care. She didn't mention the European vacation they'd booked with my money. Saturday, I drove by my house and saw a moving truck. Reality had sunk in. Sunday, an unfamiliar number called. I almost ignored it, but picked up. Lily, Richard's voice was subdued, broken. We're at the Marriott. Can we talk? I met them in the hotel restaurant. They looked like shadows of themselves, Evelyn without her flawless makeup, Richard in a rumpled shirt. The money they'd stolen couldn't buy them dignity. $300,000, Evelyn said abruptly. That's what's left from your house. We'll give it back if you let us stay. The house was worth $400,000, I said evenly. We had expenses, Richard mumbled. The Europe tickets were non-refundable. I laughed a real, bitter laugh. You spent my money on a vacation while I was relearning to walk. We were stressed, Evelyn snapped, then softened. We thought you wouldn't need it, because you thought I'd be incapacitated forever. They didn't deny it. They'd sold my future the moment they assumed I had none. Here's the deal, I said, sliding a folder across the table. You return every cent, $400,000. Sell the car, cancel the trips, liquidate whatever you need. Then sign this confession of fraud and leave town. Or I press charges: fraud, elder abuse, identity theft. Taking advantage of someone during medical incapacity counts. You'll spend your retirement in prison. You wouldn't, Richard said, but his voice trembled. I held up my phone. I have recordings of you admitting to the sale while I was unconscious. I have the forged documents. I have everything. They signed. Bullies always fold when cornered. It took 3 weeks for them to scrape together the money, selling cars, emptying retirement accounts, begging relatives. Every penny of my $400,000 returned, plus $50,000 in damages to avoid prosecution. My grandmother's house, my house, stood empty after they left. I had it cleansed, sage burned in every room to erase their presence. Then I did something Grandma would have loved. I turned it into a transitional home for brain injury survivors, people whose families had abandoned them, written them off as burdens. The opening was last month. Evelyn and Richard weren't invited, but word spread. Evelyn sent one last message. How could you do this to your parents? I replied, the same way you did it to your daughter, except I waited until you were conscious. She never responded. I heard they moved to Florida, crammed into a one-bedroom apartment, working retail to survive. Sometimes I feel a pang of guilt. Then I remember waking to Evelyn counting my money, their plans for my funeral while I was still breathing, their words, you won't need it anymore. They were right about one thing, I didn't need that cottage anymore. I needed something bigger, something to hold all the people they'd discarded, all the dreams they'd tried to crush. My grandmother's house, now the Margaret Wells House for Second Chances, shelters 12 residents at a time. We have therapy equipment, art rooms, a garden where people relearn to plant seeds. A plaque above the door honors my grandmother, Margaret, who believed in second chances, not third ones. Evelyn and Richard burned through theirs long before they sold my house. Their betrayal was just the final proof that some people don't deserve forgiveness. They deserve consequences. Last week, a woman called whose family tried to sell her condo while she was in a coma. I gave her Clara's number and a room at Margaret House. How do you live with it? She asked. The betrayal? You don't live with it, I said. You live despite it. And then you make sure it never happens to anyone else. She moved into room 3, overlooking the garden, the same room where Evelyn and Richard once planned their parties, now home to someone they'd have thrown away. My surgery scar has faded to a faint line. Sometimes I trace it, not remembering the pain or fear, but the moment I realized I was stronger than the people who raised me. The moment I knew that if they wanted to bury me, they'd better be sure I was gone. They weren't. And now I own the ground they used to walk on.